comes to wellness, we have a tendency to gravitate towards a bit of a negativity bias. And I want to get your opinion on this. So, if I decided to head out for a 5 kilometer run and I did my 5K, or actually, let's say I didn't, I did 3K. I got 3K in and I just thought, you know what? I'm wrecked, I'm tired, I'm heading back home this evening. Do you think when I got home and I showered and I was sitting down watching Netflix, do you think I would focus more on the 3 kilometers that I did do? Or do you think my mind would gravitate towards the 2 kilometers that I didn't do? And please feel free to share your answer in the chat function there. So share your answer with us in that chat function. Do you think I would focus on the 3 kilometers that I did, or would I focus on that 2K that I didn't do? And that's a big piece around wellness for us is this natural tendency that we have to gravitate towards a negativity bias. And I'm interested to, oh, very good. So we've somebody who's quite positive gone with the 3K. I can tell you now, guys, with all of the organizations that I would be delivering webinars like this for, the majority of people in the webinar normally go towards the 2 kilometers. They normally go towards the negative. It's that idea of, and I see we have a few more answers coming in there, but it is that idea that we tend to focus more on the negative. And if we think about nutrition, we think about exercise, a lot of the time we tend to focus on what we're not doing rather than focusing on the positive and what we are doing. And we want to bring that into our conversation today. But first of all, I like this one from Martin Seligman. He constantly asks the question, is health and wellness more than just the absence of illness? And for anyone who doesn't know, Martin Seligman is one of the founding fathers of positive psychology. And he basically looks at it like a carrot or stick approach. He says that we often view our wellness like this. So the carrot is the healthy reward. The idea that I might have an event coming up or I might have a holiday planned, maybe some of us may in the new year. And then the other side is the stick. That's the anxiety that we get. That could be going to the doctor and the doctor saying, listen, you've got to get your blood pressure down. Both of those factors are normally what motivate us. But actually, what Martin Seligman says is that if we can have a plan around our wellness, we can flourish in all the areas of our life. But it can be difficult. Now, when we look at it, I like to view wellness across different dimensions, and I've got a few of them here. But the best way I want you to look at this is imagine the dimensions of wellness being parts of your body. And if we took, for example, your heart, your lungs, your muscles, your brain, if we took those different parts of your body, if one of them wasn't functioning the way we want it to, it would eventually impact our overall health and even impact some of those other areas of the body which might be functioning optimally at the moment. And wellness is like that. If I'm very clear on my physical wellness goals and I get plenty of exercise and I eat well and I get good quality sleep, but I have quite a negative mindset, that inner critic, that internal dialogue is quite negative. Well, over time, what I'm going to find is that that will eat away at me. That will impact the other areas of my wellness. And ultimately, it may even decrease my motivation to exercise, to eat well, and to get good quality sleep. So the big caveat here is to make sure that you consider the different dimensions of wellness. Try not to become very focused just in one and realize that actually alignment in each of these is really what we're striving for. So to give each one a little bit of time and attention. And as we move it on, why does it become hard to give each one time and attention? Because in each of those different dimensions, we have a relationship. Now, when I say relationship, think about, for example, exercise. If I view my exercise for a moment and we go back to the question that I asked you, if I go for a 5 kilometer run and I focus on the 2 kilometers rather than the 3 that I did do, what kind of relationship have I got with exercise? Well, I probably have a negative relationship with exercise because even if I get out and I put my runners on and it's cold and I still get some exercise done, I tend to focus on the stuff I didn't do rather than focusing on the stuff that I did do. And again, Martin Seligman, to bring him in again for a moment, there's been a lot of research around habit formation. And what we see in today's society is that one of the best ways to create habits is to try and attach positive emotion to an activity. So if I look at the 7 dimensions and I think, for example, I actually have a negative relationship with my exercise, could I do anything to shift that? Could I change my belief system around that and maybe be kinder to myself in that approach? And we're going to explore one or two of these as we move through our session today, because that relationship that you have with whether it's exercise, stress, nutrition, self care, that really is the foundation when it comes to our wellness. And I want you to think about this for a moment. We all have an idea of what success looks like in a dimension. So, if we took a dimension like our social wellness, we all know that it's great to get out and catch up with friends maybe a couple of times through the week. But my day to day practice might look like I work all through the week and I'm lucky to meet a friend at the weekend for a coffee. So if we use that as our example, I have an idea of success, I have a day to day practice, and there's conflict there because my idea of success is way off what my day to day practice is. And then ultimately, we want to try and close that gap. So we have to look at a couple of things. We have to ask ourselves, is my expectation of my idea of success maybe too high? Have I got unrealistic expectations? Or maybe I haven't. Maybe what I need to do is explore that internal conversation. Remember why it's important for me to meet a friend a couple of times through the week. Think of things like the oxytocin that I produce. We've all felt it in the past few months where we no longer have maybe that coffee with a colleague or the water cooler chats that we used to have. All of these things help improve our social wellness. They help us feel good. They energize us. But if we used another example quickly, think back to exercise. Some of us might be striving for 5 30 minutes of exercise, yet our day to day practice might be that we get 2 30-minute sessions per week. Now, there's a couple of things I need to do there. I need to explore the internal conversation. Am I berating myself for not reaching the 5 30 minutes? Because if I am, well, then the gap is only going to get bigger. But also, we ask ourselves, am I being realistic with my goals that I've set in this area? And that is something that we need to strive to do throughout the different dimensions of wellness. And let me give you a quick example of limiting beliefs. Now, we all know Roger Bannister is the individual who broke the 4 minute mile. But what a lot of us might not know is that 9 years before Roger Bannister broke that 4 minute mile, the previous record stood by Gunnar Hag. Now, if we look at what people said at the time, many people said that it was impossible. Even scientists believed that it couldn't be done at the time. One of Roger Bannister's competitors, John Landy, said that Hag was a freak and we're not going to get close to it. But Roger Bannister was driven by, when we think about that internal conversation, when we think of the day to day practice and the idea of success, Roger Bannister was driven by an empowering belief that he could do it. And yes, we all know that he did. But the interesting information that came out that year was that by the end of that year, 16 other people had broken that 4 minute mile. So, and one of those was John Landy, interestingly enough. So, when we think about the belief system that we have, whether it's exercise, nutrition, stress, it really starts with us. And I really like that quote you see there. The human spirit is like an elastic band. The more you stretch, the greater your capacity. Are you living in that comfort zone at the moment in a certain area? Is it time to maybe try and get a different perspective? Because that's what it's all about. It's not about judging ourselves. It's not about trying to berate ourselves if we miss out on that 2K and we get the 3K in. It's about exploring, how can I just push my practice in each area up a little bit? And we're going to come to that. But let's look at the cognitive pitfalls in a bit more detail. What about this one? When it comes to nutrition, there's a lot of myths around nutrition, and we need to sometimes try and gain more context and balance, try and get to the truth. Now, I'm a big believer in the truths that you live by. This is one that comes from Steve Peters, the author of The Chimp Paradox. And Steve Peters believes that when it comes to the truths that you live by, things like life is not fair is one we should all have. The goalposts regularly move. And it's not to be pessimistic, it's not to be negative, but it's the idea that if we live by a certain amount of truths, like life is not fair, we're better able to deal with adversity that comes our way, like the past 9 months that we faced with COVID. But if we put that into nutrition terms, there's many myths out there. Carbohydrates are bad. Low fat is better. I'm sure you've got plenty yourself. We have to strive and be honest in terms of what are the truths that we live by. Because if you're somebody who lives by the truth that carbohydrates are bad, there's probably a high chance that you regularly go from periods of depriving yourself of carbohydrates and then maybe binging on carbohydrates. And we also know that that isn't the approach we want to take. So there's a real piece of being honest with what are the truths that I live by, whether it's nutrition, whether it's my stress, whether it's my exercise, etc. And this is shown up very prominently when we talk about stress. So, stress, which we all experience on a daily basis. If I was to ask everyone on this call, do you view stress as something that is harmful or something that is enhancing? I'm sure that many of you would say, Mark, I see it as harmful. And a few would say, I see it as enhancing. And I'm sure some would be sitting on the fence as well, saying it's a little bit of both. There was actually a study done around stress and our mindset towards stress. It was very interesting. 30,000 individuals were monitored for 8 years. They were asked two questions. Do you believe stress is harmful? And the second question was, do you suffer or have you suffered from high levels of stress in the past year? Now, the interesting findings after 8 years, what the researchers did was they actually sourced the death record. So it was a little bit morbid, but what they found was the highest group in terms of overall death rates were the individuals, which I'm sure is no surprise to you, that suffer from high levels of stress but saw stress as harmful. The surprising takeaway was that the actual lowest death rate of the four groups were the individuals who viewed stress to be enhancing but also suffered from high levels of stress. So it was that idea that they actually viewed their daily stressors not so much as threats, but as challenges. And that's just one area that can have a massive impact. So remember, it does start with us. How do we view our current situation in terms of our wellness? Am I somebody who tells myself constantly, if I had the time, I would do some meditation? If I had the time, I would get some exercise in. Because ultimately, we have to make time for these things. They're not just going to happen. We talk about structure around wellness, and I'm a big believer that if we don't structure time for it, first of all, we don't really see it as being important. And second of all, we just expect it to happen. Like if I asked everybody on this call, the last time you booked in exercise in your calendar, in your diary, did you get it done? I'm sure the majority of you would say yes. But what happens to us is in today's society is we live in a little bit of a mix between what you see here. So you see that red zone, and this comes from Kerry Evans, another sports psychologist. He worked with the New Zealand rugby team for the back-to-back World Cups. But you'll see here, when it comes to today's society, our biology has not really adapted to today's society. And what I mean by that is we receive on average 5 times more information daily than we did in the late 80s. We receive the equivalent of about 174 newspapers in a day. And what that does to us in terms of our mind and our body is it can actually trigger us into a heightened state of sympathetic activity. And just to explain that to you for a moment, if we were to use a really quick example of everyday life, think of the last time that you were driving in your car and somebody cut in front of you. You know, a lot of the time that will get us emotionally charged. That will throw us into that red zone. But that's a real heightened example. What are some of the simple examples as we move through our day? Well, notifications on our phone, emails that come through that we know can wait, but we want to answer them. So we actively have to work to try and bring ourselves closer to that sweet spot. Now, the reason why we have to do that is if I'm constantly trying to make decisions around my wellness, whether I should go for my run, whether I should give myself a couple of minutes in the morning to meditate, if I'm making those decisions from an emotionally charged brain, you can be guaranteed that more times than not, I'm not going to prioritize my wellness. Whereas if we can bring in activities that help us get closer to that blue zone and not necessarily stay in that blue zone, because it's not a case that red is bad and blue is good. Because when we think about red, red helps us act on certain things. If we were always in blue, we would have the paralysis by analysis. So it's just to make sure as we move through our day, we give ourselves opportunities to move out of the red, because we can't be in the red all the time. Physiologically, we would be exhausted. And I'm going to share with you guys ways in which we try and get our clients to get that balance right. And we've identified 9 key areas around energy. And you can see them there. And I'm also going to send these slides onto you after today. But just as we delve into one or two of them in particular, it's important that when we look at those 9 key areas, that we adopt what the theory of marginal gains. It comes from British cycling, Dave Brailsford, but it's about not making a mountain out of the molehill. It's also about knowing that energy, it's not really something that we just have. It's actually something that we need to create. And we also spend our energy as we move through the day. Like, for example, we're not like phones on our the batteries on our phone. Sorry, we can't plug ourselves in at night and just wake up fully charged. But also, we can't be vending machines to other people. We can't just allow them to take constantly and expect ourselves to be replenished. So we actively have to think, what ways in my day can I create more energy? And what ways might I be spending energy that I might be able to conserve? And I just want to go into a concept which I feel is very important and very apt based on the last few months. And it's this idea of being able to switch off. And what does that look like? Well, for many of us, it looks like putting our head on the pillow at nighttime. That's the first time many of us get to actually check in with ourselves again. No wonder we have a nation, or where globally we struggle to get good quality sleep. Because if that's the first time I allow myself to check in, well, then all of a sudden I'm going to have all of these anxious thoughts from the day. I'm going to have all of my stressors come to light when I put my head down on the pillow. So I like to bring in this concept of active recovery. It's checking in with yourself many times as you move through the day, starting your day with a 10-minute check in. It's the idea that when you kick off your day, are you straight away jumping into action? Are you checking your emails? Are you checking your phone? Are you getting breakfast ready for the kids? Because we need to give ourselves 10 minutes. Not every morning. It's not possible to do it every morning, but we've got to strive to do it more often than we don't, because we're starting on the right foot. We're able to maybe look at, how was yesterday? What am I leaving behind yesterday? What have I got no control over as I move into today? What are my most important tasks for the day ahead? That is very important for us, especially when we think of, again, 174 newspapers in a day. That is a lot of information to try and process when we're in that red zone. So one of the biggest tips I would give to my own clients is to make sure you manage your daily transitions. Like, we hear a lot of people cutting the meetings down now. The 60-minute meeting is 45 minutes and I've got 15 minutes at the end of it to get up and move around. That's very important, because we would all on this call, I'm sure, be aware of our circadian rhythm, our 24-hour cycle. But we also have another rhythm that works through the day for us, and it's called our ultradian rhythm. It happens roughly every 90 to 120 minutes. We've all had that urge after maybe 60 to 90 minutes staring at the laptop screen to get up and want to move around. That is effectively that rhythm saying, we want a little bit of a break from what you're currently doing. Now, what we normally do is we ignore that signal. We stay at the laptop. And the more we stay at that laptop, the quicker our energy starts to reduce. So mentally and physically, if I ignore those signs, my energy begins to reduce at an increased rate. So it's important to move through the day and manage your transitions, whether it's between meetings, whether it's at the end of your day and you're cutting off and you're getting back into family life. Give yourself 10 minutes. Check back in. Do a little bit of journaling. What what happened today? What am I still anxious about? What am I leaving here today? What's in my control? What's out of my control? There are things that we hear time and time again at the moment, but we hear them because they actually work. They allow us to separate some of the thoughts in our mind, we put them down on paper, and we close the chapter for the next few hours. Very important to get a good quality night's sleep. But if we even look at it from a physical point of view, why is it important to get up every 60 minutes and move around? Because I have a colleague of mine who's a physiotherapist, and she said after the first lockdown, she had more people coming to her with bad backs, sore hips, sore necks than she ever had before. Because we had fallen into this routine of spending most of our day sitting at our laptop and probably sitting at the kitchen table for some of us. I know that was the case for myself at the start. But the benefit of getting up and regular movement is that we get that oxygenated blood moving around the body. We avoid some of those simple injuries like slight issues with our back, slight issues with our neck, because I know we can all probably relate to the poor individual sitting on the chair there. And it's very easy for that to actually happen to us as we move through the day. So, where I want to bring you now, guys, because I'm conscious of our time and I also want to bring it back to you if you've got any questions for me. But the only place to finish is really around what does your roadmap look like for 2021? Have you even thought about it? Like if you reflect back on 2020, how many goals did you set that you achieved? How many goals did you set that you maybe have to be flexible now with the date that you would set to achieve those goals? And if you think about the 7 dimensions that we brought in at the start, are your goals aligned? Are your goals not just in business, but have you got some physical wellness goals? Have you got some emotional wellness goals? What about your spiritual wellness? They're your aspirations. What do you really want to achieve or get a step closer to in 2021? Because when it comes to setting goals, the mistake we often make is we either don't set them or we set performance based goals. Now, a performance based goal would be I want to run 5K, or I want to lose X amount, or I want to get this promotion by this date. And the issue with performance goals is that if we set them alone and we don't have our outcome and our process, we can actually become quite demotivated when we don't hit them. So you see, we've a brief example there of what an outcome, a performance, and a process goal looks like. And the reason why the outcome is important is because I want you to think about 6 a.m., your alarm clock goes off. You're lying in bed and you're thinking, I know I said I was going to go for a run, but it's cold. I think is it raining? I think it might be raining. Well, if my performance goal is what pops into my mind, or maybe it doesn't even pop into my mind, but if it's, well, I'm going to do that 10K at the end of the month, in your head, you can always say, oh, you know what? I'll probably still get there. I'll probably still make that 10K. But actually, if you've something stronger, if you've an outcome goal, and think about this for a moment, if you have a value of physical wellness, you want to exercise regularly, and it's not just to do 5K. Maybe it's because you know that when you exercise, your mood increases. You're more engaged with those that you love. You perform better in work. You deal with stress better when you're physically active. If these are all part of your outcome, so your ultimate outcome for physical wellness might consist of all of those things that I just mentioned. When that alarm clock goes off at 6 a.m., all of a sudden, you can be far more motivated to get up and move, because what comes into your mind is not the fact that you can move out the 5K run or the 10K run target you have, but actually it hits you emotionally. You remember that actually I get up and I exercise because it impacts positively so many areas of my life. If we look at breaking that process down, you look at then the actual day-to-day action. So I schedule in 3 runs through the week. Like we all know this, but whether we do it or not is a different question. But trust me, guys, this is a key around your wellness, around you aligning those different dimensions of wellness. You've got to be really clear on what your outcome performance and your process goals are. Because remember, again, we spend a lot of our time in that red zone. If we can't attach something meaningful to an activity, it's very easy for us to choose Netflix over going for the run. So it really ties the importance back to being having clarity on your goals. Now, these are your last five takeaways, and then I want to give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. But just to really wrap it up, guys, explore your internal conversations. Drop the negative, drop the comparison, drop the guilt and the judgment, because ultimately it only makes that gap bigger that we spoke about. Try and increase your self awareness on what your barriers are. Have you got unrealistic goals? Do you schedule exercise on a Tuesday when it's your busiest day in work and it just never happens? Let's try and limit those barriers. Bring in structure around that. Bring in structure in those different dimensions. Be kind in your approach. We kind of mentioned it in the first piece. Be kind in your approach, because that positivity will spur more of those actions which benefit those key areas and those key dimensions. And the last piece to leave you with would be spend time defining that roadmap. We've just spoken about it. If you do one thing between now and Christmas, get down your goals across those different dimensions. And for anyone who's interested in more information on any of the topics that I spoke about this evening, here's my LinkedIn profile, and I would love to add you to my network if we're not already connected, because I regularly post articles and blogs and videos on the subjects that we spoke about this evening. And